Hello, everyone. Welcome to the military to civilian transition. As we let some folks load in here, this is our monthly special webinar. Remember, again, every month we do our VA loan crash course, typically on the third Thursday of the month. And then we follow it on most times with a special discussion at the bottom of the hour, so to say, at 2:30 Central. And today's is going to be the military to civilian transition. The goal here is taking into some home buying considerations if you happen to be transitioning from military to civilian life. This is almost like a sub niche, I'd say, that we have. So we've at Home Loans, we focus specifically on active duty home ownership. So we work with a lot of active duty military. Only represents like 2-3% of home buyers in the country any given year. But a sub niche within that is helping folks transition out of active duty into civilian life, because there are some definite big considerations you have to take into account. So we're going to do and talk on that today. Here's a slide that basically introduces myself. My name's Evan Kaufman. I like to say your VA loan educator. Basics of it are, done a lot of VA loans, worked with military families for a lot of my life, and I was in the Air Force at one point too. Now a veteran. It slowly gets further and further away from that, but I do enjoy thoroughly working for military families, having to be moving around the country. That first started as a real estate broker, selling homes and enjoying that, building a company called WeVet Realty, helping connect military families with agents around the country, leaving that company to start WeVet Home Loans, where we help military families with the VA loan, because it's another part of the process that's unique with the military moving process. So let's get in though to once that military career comes to an end, because a lot of clients we've worked for, they got to the end of their military career and now they're getting out going, what do I do? And this is some of the stuff that's taken from my own ideas, my own transition out, and from all those clients that we get to work for as well. So the big objectives, the four big ones we're going to touch on. Number one, the military versus civilian pay changes, things that you need to consider. Things are different than when you had a nice simple LES from the military. We'll talk about self-employed versus salaried W-2 jobs, things that you got to think about when you're dealing with profit versus bonus versus salaries. Then we'll touch on VA loan considerations. So, hey, if I'm transitioning out, what do I got to think ahead of for my VA loan eligibility? Talking about job letters, skill bridge programs if you happen to be on, and we're even going to go over a timeline scenario to show you how you can get a home up to 6 months before you're even getting out. And then lastly, we'll talk about the four key takeaways to the whole thing that we'll touch on at the very end. First, let's look at the military versus civilian pay changes. So know this right up front. Not all pay is considered equal. If you're getting out and you were in the military for just a few years or for 20, 30 years, know that when you're getting out and changing jobs, even if you think it's to a normal like civilian job, W-2 or whatever it is, or you just say, oh, I'm getting a normal civilian job, the pay is different and treated differently on mortgages than how it was when you were in the military. So the major pay changes when leaving, of course, your tax-exempt pay, BAH, BAS, flight pay, danger pay, different things that if you were applying for a mortgage while you're in the military, those were tax-free. So they actually got a modifier that boosted them. Like BAH, we take it and we multiply it by 1.25 because it's not taxed. So if it's $1,000, we count it as $1,250 for income. That generally goes away when you go into civilian world or getting paid on the outside. So know that there's an adjustment there. Health insurance. This is not necessarily mortgage related, but I throw this in here because it's big for me. There's a massive change in health insurance when going from, say, TRICARE to good luck on your own care. If you happen to be retiring, good deal. That TRICARE for life, be glad you got it. But just know it's going to be a major change. Pension and retirement changes. So those deductions. If you're on the old military system, you're not worrying about putting much stuff in. If you're on the newer one and you're contributing and whatnot, yeah, you had some deductions when you get out. Be aware that you're really going to have to account for that pension or any retirement changes that you're going to have in the future. For example, most companies don't have pensions, so you better start preparing and planning for that. And that could mean that if you're taking money out for deductions, it could change your pay as well. So just know there's some major pay changes when you're leaving, things that I was kind of aware-ish of, but never fully thought through. The big thing for mortgage applications is know that these changes can impact what you qualify for. So let's touch on some of that. All right, main thing up front, when people are getting out, they'll say, Evan, I'm getting out in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 months, whenever it is. The biggest question I'll have generally up front is, what do you intend on having as your job? This is if they tell me they want to try to buy when they're transitioning or right after they're transitioning, because that can determine what type of pay we can use. So the big thing is, are you W-2 or are you self-employed? And we're going to touch on that here in just a sec. So know that not all pay qualifies as the same. So like the big difference between self-employed and working for, we say, an established company, but really it's a W-2 paycheck that you're getting that's not a company you technically own. Sometimes people are like, oh, hey, I own the company, I'm paying myself a W-2. It's treated as self-employment income then. But let's say you get a job at For example, military families we work with, you get a job at one of the big government contractors, and it's your Lockheed Martin, your Boeing, etc., and you're going to be a W-2 employee, not a contracted employee. That makes a difference. 1099 and stuff makes a big difference. Or W-2, but on a short-term, 1-year contract or 6-month contract, that can impact how your pay is qualified. The key is, if you're getting out and you're going to have a W-2 salary, typically that puts you in a good shape, and we can generally just go off the W-2 pay. And we'll talk about even job letters here in a second and how that can really help you get a home even before you start the job. But if you're going to be self-employed, there can be a big difference. So if you're going to be self-employed, know this, self-employed pay, we got to review 2 years of income. VA requires us to look at 2 years of income and take the average. If your pay is going up, we can take the average. If your pay is going down, we actually have to take the lowest of the years. So when working with folks who say, I want to get out, and they're like, Evan, I like what you do. I want to be a loan officer. Well, if you're W-2'd and salaried, not bonus commissioned, then you might be okay. If it's a flat salary and we can prove that and it ties well to what you've done in some level, okay, that might be all right. But if you're like most loan officers and you're heavily bonused for everything, or it's pure commission or whatnot for business that you build, then all of a sudden 2 years is the qualification. Real estate agents, especially if you're fully 1099, like, hey, 1099, starting your own business. Hey, I want to go start my own practice, my own business. 2 years is the track record you're going to have to see. So know that if you're getting out or seeing yourself getting out and you're wanting to go start your own thing, you better make sure you're really comfortable with your home and you're in, or that your spouse has a good job lined up, or that you really figure out how to start planning and doing that now. So once you're out, you're ready and in good shape to make sure that you can still either buy a home or know that you're going to wait until you get those 2 years to buy the next house. So it makes a big difference. Now, some people are like, well, Evan, I'm W-2. This is common in like tech jobs. Hey, W-2, I got a new one. I'm going to make $100,000 a year. Awesome. Great pay. How's that broken out though now? Well, it's W-2'd. Okay, but how's it broken out? Because profit sharing and commission based on those sheets can make a big difference. If you're W-2 salaried, your base is $50,000, and then you have the ability where it shows on your letter or whatnot that your commissions or your expected earnings are going to be $50,000. All of a sudden, if it's expected earnings and it falls into commission categories, it's a little bit more wishy-washy. 2 years kicks in for the most part. You got to have 2 years of history or more than that. If we're going to look back at if you're changing jobs and professions and stuff, sometimes we got to look back and see, do you have a good track record of this? But generally that 2 years is what we got to then see. So just know that when the pay starts getting variable, all of a sudden 2 years is the general consensus that kicks in, that you have to show that you have consistency with that type of work. So know that there's a big difference, and that's totally different than when you're in the military, because in the military, it's like the gold standard of pay. When we get a military family, man, we look at that, we know that paycheck's there, we know it's coming, it's very set, we don't have to worry about any variability, it's clean. Truly, when you're qualifying for loans while you're in the military, it is so much simpler than once you're out. Even if you have a nice clean W-2 job getting out, it's simpler just because the pay is so standard and structured. So know that makes a big difference. Now, one little thing that I threw in there and I hinted at earlier, if you happen to start a company, and this is very common now for business owners, they'll make their company, they'll pay themselves a W-2, and they'll say, hey, but it's a W-2. Well, if you own the company and it's a controlled company by you, or even if it's a close family member, then they'll generally want to still see those 2 years because they treat it as self-employed, because is that W-2 real? You have full control over it. That's just what happens with it. So know that that's another complication that can be added to self-employed income, or even if it's W-2, but you happen to be controlling it. Now, we'll talk in a second though, where I give you an actual scenario, especially when we talk about the job letters that I'll just talk about right now, that makes a big impact on this. So know that one benefit, especially for the VA loan, is that we can actually close on what are called job letters. So know this, number one, you can close on a home before getting out and before starting your next job even, which is pretty wild. So we can close on a home up to 60 days prior to your new start date at a job, sometimes even sooner than that. Now, the income is based on the job letter and any defined benefits you might be getting if you happen to be retired. Let's say you're retiring from the military, or this could be for any job for that matter. We can use it like if you're getting out at 20 and there's a retirement letter that shows, hey, Johnny's going to be getting XYZ, or the retirement calculator the military has, we can use that income. The VA we can use as long as it can be confirmed. You got a VA award letter, eligibility, we can see for that. But for retirement pay, we can use that even if you're still in, as long as we have that proof that you will be getting out for retirement. Now, the other part is that job letter. The one big thing on it is it, because it sounds too good to be true, right? You mean I just need a letter and I can go get a house before I even start the job? Yeah, it is sometimes too good to be true, but there's a lot of caveats to it. So number 2, make sure you have what we call a clear job letter. And this is especially if you're closing prior to the start date of the job. The moment you start the job, we either need validation from the employer that you're getting paid that or your first pay stubs. So if it's before you start the job, here's the 4 big things. A, it's got to be full-time. B, it's got to clearly define the pay. It has to be salary or hourly, and that hourly has to be full-time still. And it's got to show that 40 hours or full-time's 38 and it's a high pay. It's got to be very, very clear that you're full-time and it shows the hourly or salary paid. Then there has to be no contingencies. The big examples here are like there's no certification or degree or drug test that you need to pass. We need them saying all contingencies are cleared, and then it has to be signed by some responsible authority, HR, the manager, whoever's making that job offer for you. If you have all those things, that's a clear job letter, and you can actually close on a home before you start the job, which is absolutely, really, I should say insane, but it's not so insane, but it's going to be such a good thing if you're getting out and you're trying to do that awkward move between, well, I'm getting out, but I'm starting the job in 2 months there, but I want to get the home so I can start moving my stuff. This allows you to do that. And in fact, we can go over an example here in a minute where we'll go over, hey, how you can really backtrack from your getting out date to getting a home early. Now, another consideration, know number 3, that your VA loan funding fee can be waived. So we just had our VA loan crash course. We talked that VA loan funding fee. If you don't have 10% or greater disability compensation, you're hit with the VA loan funding fee. Well, it can be waived if you have 10% or greater VA disability compensation, or if you're in the transitioning and getting out and you filed your VA disability claim. As long as we get a file form 268937 or a notification from the VA that's been done for it, then you can ultimately get your VA funding fee still waived. And if not, for some reason, you can get a refund later. The key is making sure that your claim that was put in, the date is before you close on the home, and that the VA is tracking that. We've learned that's not always the case. So we want to call and say, hey, when is that effective date, and when was the application date for it that will show the effective date? Because that dictates when you can technically get that waived. As I always say, hey, you want to make sure that you filed your paperwork, just that form. If you filed your disability claim, ideally a long time before, but you want to make sure that form's in at least 3 weeks prior to close. Now let's talk about SkillBridge programs, something to be aware of. SkillBridge has become big. And if you're not quite aware of what that is, SkillBridge program is effectively, personally, I think it's a great program. I mean, I did it myself. I was one of the first ones to use it when I was getting out back in 2018. And it's a program where effectively you can do an internship or job work with a company, with outside industry, as you're transitioning out. And the whole goal of the program is to let folks get a feel for what it's like so you can start testing out what kind of job you may or may not like for stuff and to prepare for that transition. Because there's a real difference in the transition. That's for real. And it can be up to 6 months long. That SkillBridge program, we've seen people on it from a few weeks to a full 6 months, depending on what they worked out with their command and everything like that. Now, the one thing that SkillBridge can throw a wrench into is, remember I mentioned that we can close on job letters. Well, that job letter is generally got to be within 60 days. In SkillBridge, if you go start work at a job, one big thing there is SkillBridge, you're not allowed to get paid by the new employer because you're still paid by the military. So if you're trying to go somewhere for a SkillBridge program 6 months before getting out, that can throw a bit of a wrench in there. If you're taking terminal leave, that's another deal because you can usually start your next job and start getting paid. But SkillBridge prevents you from getting paid at your next job for stuff. So just know that can sometimes hamper if you can close on the next home or not. Because sometimes people will say, hey, but Evan, I'm still active duty, so can't that pay work? The VA requires something called 1 year continuation of pay, meaning you need to expect to be getting that pay for at least 1 year. So if your separation orders are already in and it shows on your LES a separation and it's less than 1 year, we can't use your military pay, which makes it tough. So if you're on a SkillBridge program, it's obvious you're not going to be getting paid within the next year or in a year from now by the military, so we can't use your active duty pay. And you can't get paid by the new people yet. So that's where you can get in a little bit of a conundrum with the SkillBridge program. But let's talk in this scenario. This scenario we like to call is Captain America. This is a guy that's getting out at the very end of the year. December 31st is getting out. But he's going on terminal on 31 October. So about 60 days earlier, he's going on terminal leave. Remember, terminal can be different because you can oftentimes, what people like to say, double dip. Start your new job right away when you go on terminal. So in this scenario, I'm going to show you how, hey, you can start looking for homes well in advance, 6 months before you're actually even getting out of the military. So Captain America's getting out at the very end of year, December 31st. He's going to go ahead and take terminal though, on that 31st October. And he said, I'm going to start my job right away though. So I start double dipping for a couple months, generate up that savings, get ready. We want to move our family and get all that stuff going. So he's going to start his new job on November 1st. Remember, so long as it's a clean job letter, we can close on a home up to 60 days before that. Sometimes even a hair different, more earlier than that. So that means he can close early September. So all of a sudden we're at a scenario where Captain America's closing on a home in September, but he's technically not out of the military until December. That means that he can really start looking for homes and even get a home under contract 30 to 60 days before that. So before you know it, Captain America can really start looking at homes and throwing in offers in July and August before he's getting out in December. So that's how you ultimately start getting to be able to look and get ready for a home purchase and transition up to 6 months before you're getting out of the military. Now, keep in mind though, again, once you start a job, we generally need the first pay stub or verification from your employer. So the job letter really comes into play if you're just trying to close prior to your start date. And one thing I'll throw in there that we've had some curveballs with recently is that if your job letter says one thing and then your first pay stub says something different, that can cause a big issue. So you want to make sure that pay stub really reflects your job letter correctly as well. But that's just a good example and scenario of how you can actually start looking for homes and prepare to purchase your next home before getting out of the military, a half a year before actually getting out. So 4 key takeaways. Let's hit on those real quick. Number 1, know your type of pay has a big impact on your loan qualification. Know as well that job letters are very important for closing if you are before you are trying to buy before your official out date. And that job letter, by the way, that can work in the future in other jobs as well, not just transitioning out of the military. Number 3, you can get your VA funding fee waived. If you want to, just make sure you file the claim prior to closing, make sure all your ducks in a row. There can be a lot of moving targets there, so you want to talk with your lender about when you filed it, follow up the VA. You want to make sure you're set, because if you can't get it refunded at close, sometimes you can get it refunded later in a check form. And then lastly, know that you can definitely close on a home well before getting out of the military. What that means is for some people, hey, as I'm transitioning out, I want to make sure that my home life is set up, it's stable, and it's ready for me as I'm getting out. And I know a lot of that personally, because for myself transitioning, it was one of those things of knowing, hey, what's it going to look like on the outside when I get out? That is why it's important to make sure that you can look ahead, especially for your home, and see what can I do. So hopefully this course helped give you some of those ideas. Now, if you're ultimately wondering, how do I go out there and win a home with a VA loan, especially if it's when I'm transitioning out? The last slide we'd like to show here is, hey, well, there's thousands of versions of VA loan and how it's treated and how lenders understand it. Work with someone who gets it. This is where we give the basics of, we obviously understand that. We'd love the opportunity to work for you if you happen to be transitioning out. There's my contact information. Feel free to reach out. More than happy to see if we can make this work for you. The last slides are next steps. There's actually the updated contact information. And then you look down below, you can see if you want to, you can get started on a VA loan with us at wevet.com/get started. If you need a real estate agent, Wevet Realty, our other company that can help you connect with a military-focused real estate agent, you can reach out to them. Or if you need some good resources, we have a lot of those on wevet.com/resource or education or resources, either one of those works. And we'd love to see you just take advantage of all that material we have, material that I know I didn't have as I transitioned out. So my name's Evan Compton again, your VA loan educator. As long as I look over and see that we have no comments, I will say we're okay and to go. That look, no comments, good deal. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this slide. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below if this is on YouTube, or email message us directly. Take care.